Next up, we have Tivan Limited, which is ASX code TVN. The market cap is 117 million. And today from Tivan, we welcome Grant Wilson, Executive Chair. Tivan engages in the exploration, evaluation and development of mineral resources. The company's current focus is on vanadium and titanium. Grant, please take it away.
Thanks, Manny. And thanks at the top for getting the name right. We've had a little bit of Tivan floating around recently. So just to clarify for everyone, it is Tivan, and that's titanium and vanadium. The company's been on a pretty epic journey for the past 12 months. It started with a change of control from a previous company referred to as TNG Limited, which concluded at the end of last year. And there's been some really, really significant changes. These slides that I'll work through today, I presented at NT Resources Week last week in Darwin, where we're now headquartered. There's about 800 people there. So we've sort of set things alight up north. And the purpose of today is just to pull through some slides quickly. We do have a larger investor deck for people online. That'll be updated next week, I think. We're on a 6-monthly cycle with that. So today's more conceptual, just to sort of spread the word about what we're working on, because we are working fast, and this is a highly differentiated value proposition and company that's emerging. So first slide is just to explain the big vision, really, that we have for the vanadium sector in particular. The secular bull market that we're in for critical minerals, we fully believe in, and we expect it will run for decades. There's been 2 waves in our view. The rare earths wave, focused around Mount Weld, Lynas, so call that 2010 to maybe 2017. That was in the lead for batteries and magnets. And then we moved into the lithium wave, which is centered around a use case of EVs. And you saw again, key resources such as Greenbushes leading the way. Our big view on vanadium is that the industry will not take shape in Australia and probably globally unless it's led with the best and most strategically significant resource. To build a whole industrialization pathway for a new sector is not a trivial exercise, and you need to lead with the most significant and the highest grade and the best resource globally, and that's Speewah. And we acquired Speewah in February from a company called KRR, who now is on our register. It's located near where I am today. I'm in Broome today. It's over in the East Kimberley, near Wyndham, and we've obviously been working on it all year. TNG owned the resource next to that in the slide called Mount Peak. That's in, the centre of Australia. And you'll see these other resources globally. Some of them are in production in Brazil and South Africa. The ones that tend to make production are the ones with a very high vanadium concentrate grade. The ones that we think will wither on the vine have low concentrate grade or are too far away from port or are buried underground. Speewah has 4 really unique and significant characteristics. A very high vanadium grade, very close to port, only 100 kilometres away. It's outcropping, so practically on the surface. And you can see this incredible size on the chart very clearly, capable of supporting a strategically significant project for Australia for up to 150 years and launching the vanadium industry globally. Next. The second big move that we had to make to recover from what I walked into at TNG Limited was to relocate the company, and particularly the critical mineral processing facility, to an industrial zone capable of facilitating what we really require to get it going, which is large-scale renewable energy, access to large-scale water resources, ideally proximate to an urban workforce. And these things exist at the Middle Arm Sustainable Development Precinct in Darwin. It's been making a lot of news recently. We're going to end up in a Senate inquiry before the end of the year. There's various other proponents there, but Tivan was first to be out and proud. That was February in a deal that I did with the NT government. We're very grateful to the NT government for supporting our transition back from centre of Australia to Middle Arm. It was a very important staging point and really set the tone for many other initiatives that we've run this year. So at this stage, the basic proposal is to have a long-run track towards Middle Arm. You could think of that as 7 to even 10 years out. It's a very ambitious long-run project that could be definitive for the Northern Australia in the sense that it has a 100-year life, and it can be a true sovereign capability for Australia in vanadium and in titanium. But we'll need the facilitation for Middle Arm, and we'll need big solar projects to come online to provide that renewable energy that we cannot get off the grid. And we are formally partnered up with Sun Cable, which has recently been acquired by Quinbrook, which is a fantastic facilitation partner for us. In the shorter term, though, our priority is to get the company to revenue. And so we are in the process of building a fast-track vanadium salt roast at site at Speewah. And we've actually announced this morning that our EPC contractor of choice is the preeminent global vanadium engineering firm, which is Hatch, and they've joined us just this morning. So we're at Middle Arm and Speewah up in the Kimberley, and we've been spending a lot of time up here this year. Next, is critical in this part of the country to have deep and constructive and early engagement with traditional owners. So if you could just turn the slide. Thanks. We've put this framework out in the public domain in the past couple of months. It's resulted from an enormous amount of work that I've put in privately over the past 6 months. My heritage is actually Alice Springs. I grew up there, so I've always had strong connections on country with the First Nations leaders and communities. And I've been repairing a lot of those relationships on behalf of TNG to Tivan this year. But happily, we're at a point now with the key land councils, the Kimberley Land Council here in Broome, and with other key traditional owner groups such as Larrakia in Darwin, where we're able to advance in ways that other people will not be able to, in my view. And that involves us moving beyond the traditional concepts of free, prior, informed consent and into genuine early inclusion and participation, we hope, for our traditional owners at Speewah over time as well. I can't say too much about this portfolio today. It's complex, but I can say that we've made a lot of progress. It's also facilitated us being on country already this year, which is highly unusual, and able to move our baseline environmental surveys along at rapid speed. Next, a shout out to the team we've put together this year. There's only a couple of people left from the TNG era, if I'm frank, and we've gone through a whole rejuvenation process. And this is one of the standout achievements, I think, this year. It's very visible. We appointed 3 high-profile people to a technical advisory group in May of this year, including a former managing director of Rio Tinto's titanium business globally, Professor Maria Skylas-Kazakos, the inventor of vanadium batteries, who is Australian, and she's quite a legend, not just in Australia, but right around the world. Simon Flowers, who facilitated the master planning for the NT government at Middle Arm over the past couple of years. Additionally, we've been working closely with CSIRO all year, and we still hope to be able to be public with what we've been working on there in terms of the critical mineral processing technology before the end of the year. Briefly, we've also strengthened the board significantly. The hostile campaign that I ran and led last year resulted in 2 boards being dismissed and 6 directors ultimately leaving the company. So we now have 4 directors, everyone's new. Some very high profile people have joined our board, including Christine Charles, who's very well known in the sustainability space, in the First Nations space, in academia. And most recently, Dr. Guy Debelle, former Reserve Bank Deputy Governor, joined us from Fortescue a couple of weeks ago to lend a hand in terms of his broad views on how the energy transition will take shape in Australia, as well as the sustainability financing agenda. And Guy's hit the ground running, and it's a great privilege to be working with him. Next. This is the grand vision, the life cycle, how we're going to build this entire industry. And it's a bit complicated, but a lot of our shareholders will be quite familiar with this slide. The key message here is circularity. At Tivan, we believe circularity will be the new sustainability. And circularity often gets misused. There's a little bit of greenwashing floating around when people use this term. An easy way to think about it is that someone's inputs have to be someone's outputs and vice versa. And you'll see in our instance, this sovereign capability that I'm referring to is the ability to mine at Speewah, do beneficiation, ultimately derive vanadium oxides, which can be turned into vanadium electrolyte, which can power a battery, which can be attached to the grid, or indeed a large solar or wind resource. Now, we need their power and they need our battery, hence the circularity. So it's this sovereign capability, which is quite unique for Tivan. This cannot take place in the lithium sector. It cannot take place in the rare earth sector. All of these precursors will always be made in Asia. In Australia, we can do all of this because vanadium batteries are elemental. And if we crack it at Speewah, we will lead the way, not just in terms of this life cycle, but in terms of deployment in Australia, as well as deployment in key markets overseas, including Taiwan and especially the US. Finally, this is to emphasize the scale and scope and impact of this ambition. Speewah is such a monumental resource that we've calculated in turning the vanadium into oxides and then into electrolyte and into batteries, you have the capability to offset and abate emissions from either coal, gas, or oil at a scale which is roughly twice Australia's entire carbon budget. And so this is, without argument, the most forward-facing project definition in Australia, certainly in the critical mineral sector. And we view Speewah itself as the largest carbon sink on the planet in mineralized form. So it's a unique project. It's critically important for Australia that we get this right, and we're very much on that path. So the grand vision, which has been in the newspapers up in Darwin and across the Kimberley, which is exciting a lot of people, if I can say, is the final slide. And just to emphasize once again, the opportunity that we have with large solar projects that we're working with already to facilitate their batteries, and for us to work in a circular definition to offtake their power. This in turn then provides them with an opportunity to build more ambitious export industries such as hydrogen, ammonia, and so forth over time. But it's fair to say Speewah and the project we're now working on rapidly, is fundamentally important to the definition of Northern Australia in the next 5-10 years. So that's a quick wrap. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, Grant, thank you. Thank you for that. We do have a few questions that have come in. Why don't I start with, I'll start with this one. Can you elaborate a little bit or discuss Tivan's plans with regards to funding for the pathway ahead? And is there the prospect of a potential project partner or even a strategic investment?
Yeah, you can imagine with all the changes over the course of this year, we've had to manage our fiscal resources very carefully, and that's still the reality. We've actually achieved all of this pretty much on a shoestring. And so there's two broad paths ahead. We can continue to raise capital organically, work our way up through the cap spectrum from retail to small instos to larger instos. And we're on that path. We raised $6 million mid-year in a highly differentiated fashion. If you look through the critical mineral sector, the average discount this year has been around 23 to 25%. We raised money 1% discount in a deal which was, again, highly differentiated and reflects the superior access that Tivan has to capital markets. So that's an organic path. The concept of a strategic investor is starting to come into play. I can confirm that. These processes tend to take about 6 months, tend to involve extensive due diligence. And so looking at that more as a first half next year type objective. But fair to say we've advanced the ball significantly recently as well. And not just one ball. As with everything that I've done at Tivan, I believe in the principle of competitive tension, which is to say, even if there are big suitors now very interested in what we're doing, I don't just want one dialogue. I want 2 or 3 to ensure that we get the best interest for the best outcome for the company and for shareholders into next year.
Okay. The next question is really just asking, and you touched on this during the presentation, but can you just elaborate a little bit on what the timeframes are you are operating towards? Just remind us how that works, and if you could overlay that a little bit with with what you're expecting to see from approvals, from the approvals perspective with traditional landowners, the federal government, the state government, etc. How does that all fit in together?
Yeah, I'll try to summarize briefly. Again, in April, after things had started to settle down, we described to shareholders a long pathway. We refer to this as a Tivan Plus pathway, where we're working on the critical minerals technology with CSIRO, and we'll have to pilot that. And that pilot plan will take time to engineer and build and operate. It's a 2 to 3 year project by itself. So this is one very long train. And ultimately, that very large project will require large-scale facilitation from government and from solar projects, which may not be ready. And so in July, we started to talk publicly and then have since put a lot of detail in the public domain about the fast track, which is a known technology pathway where we can just go for the vanadium and we're not reliant upon anyone else. obviously there are approvals, and these will all come together in the next couple of years, both First Nations and environmental, not so much government. That side of it's already effectively taken care of. But we see the approval processes coalescing in 2025, putting us on track for FID on the fast track in 2026. The appointment with Hatch is important in this regard, because in the next couple of months, they're coming through and reviewing all of the work that we've done for 6 months, all of the really, really technical work. And it's a very, very sophisticated team that we have. And it's an opportunity for Hatch to come through and to cross-check with their knowledge of the industry how our internal timelines hold up. So I expect to be able to provide more clarity, more precision on timelines at the AGM in November, and that's the aim.
Okay, great. And just one last one. What are, just for the for investors and shareholders, what should they be looking for in terms of news flow over the remainder of this year and early into next year? What are the key announcements we're looking for and that we should keep an eye out for?
Yeah, sure. The shareholders that have been with us through the big change will know that we're operating at absolute velocity force. I come from a hedge fund background. There's people who've come from finance, from private equity. It's a very different setup here. This is not a resources company. This is an energy transition company being led by some of the most dynamic and sophisticated management in the country. So I want to round out this year with our AGM, which is November 17. So I've still got about 2 months to play with. Yeah, with more deals. I think I've done 7 or 8 deals this year. There's a couple more. I think we can close them out. I'm actually using the AGM as a deadline to put a little bit of pressure on some people at the table. I think we'll get some news from CSIRO. It's public. We've said already that we're working in close collaboration, and I hope that this can all come together. CSIRO is a slow-moving beast, but it's very important for us, and it will put Tivan in unique territory. I think we'll have more news flow next week, which will surprise people, and we'll just we're just going to keep hammering away. And that's what's required. That was what's required through the change. But to execute and to build a project and indeed an industry of the significance that we're talking about, you do need that mindset, and you need teamwork most of all. And we have a fantastic team that we've put together this year, and we're genuinely excited about the path ahead.
Grant, thank you very much for that. That was great. Have a great weekend, and hopefully we'll see you back here telling us about everything you've achieved the next time.